Hi, I'm Alex Bowe, and I will be talking about Iran's naval forces and its unique threat as an asymmetric force. While I believe that the chances of U.S.-Iranian conflict has diminished since nuclear negotiations, as displayed by the quick return of American sailors a few weeks ago, it is imperative that the U.S. understand how to deal with asymmetric naval forces. Excluding the declining Russian Navy and the growing Chinese PLA Navy, the U.S. Navy is likely to remain unmatched in naval power during the next few decades. While the U.S. should focus on strengthening its Navy against conventional threats, it is imperative that also begins to shift towards preparing against asymmetric threats. The Al-Qaeda attack on the USS Kola in 2000 easily demonstrated how costly asymmetric attacks can be. One simple motorboat armed with explosives killed and injured several sailors and kept the ship out of commission until 2004. While the U.S. would likely prevail in the end against an asymmetric threat, it exposes itself to unnecessary costs in lives and equipment if it does not properly prepare against these threats. If asymmetric conflicts continue to rise around the world, the U.S. must actively prepare to deal with these new strategies and tactics. By analyzing Iran's Navy, it is possible to see an excellent case of how a country has adapted to its geopolitical situation and adopted asymmetric tactics to hit above its conventional strength. In order to properly understand how Iran came to adopt an asymmetric strategy, one must look at the historic path that drove it to adopting these tactics. During World War II, Iran's navy was decimated by Anglo-Russian forces during the Iranian invasion. The Allies invaded Iran in order to create a land supply route to the USSR and to keep Iran from joining the Nazi war machine. While Iran was a neutral party before the invasion, its leader leaned towards sympathizing with Hitler. The invasion force also effectively destroyed most of Iran's navy and some of its higher-ranked officer corps. This effectively left Iran with no real navy. Following the war, Iran's new Shah desired to expand Iran's geopolitical influence as a regional power. It sought to create a deep-water navy, and it pursued this naval goal by buying equipment and ships from Western powers. This continued until the 1979 revolution, which obviously led to an export ban on Western equipment and ships. Following this period, Iran was forced to either home produce its equipment or buy it from non-Western sources such as North Korea or Russia. This transition meant that Iran downgraded its deep water aspirations to defending its interests in the Gulf. Iran was quickly pushed into its first naval conflict with Iraq immediately following the revolution. Iraq, seeking to bankrupt Iran's war machine and economy, sought to target tankers during the Iran-Iraq War. However, this strategy was largely ineffective, as Iraq lacked the long-range capabilities to fully harass Iranian tankers. Even though the war created a 25% drop in shipments throughout the Gulf, Iran was still able to attract tankers by lowering the price that they sold oil at in order to offset the higher insurance costs for shipping within the region. The tanker war also demonstrated Iran's dedication to not closing the Gulf. Even though it threatened to do so multiple times throughout the war, it never did so. If it had, it would have anchored the West even further and possibly drawn them into a war. This highlights a key principle to their naval strategy. While Iran desires to maintain the ability to close off the Straits of Hormuz, it won't do so unless significantly pushed. Since nearly 14 to 18% of the world's oil supply travels throughout the strait, a blockade would effectively be an act of war and draw the ire of the U.S. and other countries. Therefore, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be a costly action. It would likely be encountered to U.S. Western aggressive actions, or in an unlikely scenario where the benefits of closing the strait outweigh the cost. In order to achieve any objective, one must have the correct tools to bring it about. Understanding its unique situation, Iran has equipped itself for operating effectively within the Persian Gulf as an asymmetric force. It is primarily made up of small to medium-sized fast attack craft such as the Shura motorboat, which is the most popular ship amongst Revolutionary Guard members. These boats are primarily armed with heavy machine guns, rocket launchers, and can be outfitted to carry mines. Some of the bigger medium fast attack ships, such as the North Korean IPS-18, are capable of carrying torpedoes and larger rocket launchers. The Navy is also equipped with 3 Russian Kila submarines and several locally built Gadir submarines. Iran has several local and older British frigates and corvettes and is in the process of building a destroyer. The lopsided makeup of Iran's conventional naval forces reveals that it will be primarily focused on asymmetric strategies that their small to medium and fast attack ships and submarines can excel at. Instead of adopting a strategy of primarily conventional warfare, Iran has adopted a strategy that asymmetrically raises the cost of warfare. While the US is likely to prevail in a war, Iran hopes to raise the cost beyond admissible levels. It will do so through surprising swarming attacks with its small to medium fast attack craft armed with machine guns and rocket launchers, its collection of submarines, and its extensive mine arsenal. In order to adapt to not being able to have a traditionally strong navy, Iran has focused on utilizing small motorboats towards swarm tactics. While each boat may not be able to cause much havoc, as a group they can potentially knock a ship out of commission temporarily, just like how a beehive can kill a person if there are enough angry bees swarming them. Furthermore, these small boats are likely to be missed in preemptive strikes. While long-range missiles and airstrikes can lay waste to a centralized port full of warships, these motorboats can be docked in numerous islands, inlets, coves, fishing villages, and etc. that would make any preemptive strike difficult due to how numerous and small these targets would be. Furthermore, these geographic features allow Iranians to stealthily gather intelligence about US ship movements. By using these coastal villages and coastal areas, Iran would stealthily launch motorboats across a staggered amount of time without raising suspicion. The boats could also be further camouflaged to look like fishing vessels in order to further evade even more suspicion. When the time for the attack comes, these decentralized boats can converge around their target and remove it out of commission. It is difficult to say how effective the US would be at defending against a large swarm attack against Iran in the Gulf. Given the Navy's focus on long-distance attacks, it may have grown rusty in its ability to deal with close combat enemies. In 2002, the Millennium Challenge displayed the potential of asymmetric swarm attacks by using tactics such as using civilian boats, conducting swarm and suicide attacks against key US ships, secretly distributing orders through minarets, and other unorthodox methods. The Red forces were able to sink nearly 16 ships and created thousands of US casualties. Furthermore, the military's decision to reset the simulation may have been a sign of general neglectfulness in preparing against asymmetric tactics, which could allow for swarming tactics and the like to be quite effective against the US. It should be noted that Iran's submarines would have a mixed effectiveness against US military forces. Their ability to hide in their environment is mixed. On the one hand, the low water levels and the relatively close coastlines mean that the diesel submarines would have a better chance of hiding from sonar due to ambient noise. However, the US's extensive experience with tracking submarines and the necessity for submarines to head to a limited number of ports that are capable of handling them would limit this advantage in the long run. The main strength of its submarines would be in the initial surprise attack, which could leave several US ships inoperable. The subs can also be utilized in Iran's mine-laying missions. Iran's real threat lies in its mine-laying capabilities. Owning the fourth largest arsenal of mines, Iran could effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz with relative ease. Even if it is unable to do so, it could easily target prominent shipping lanes. Most shipping lanes traveling through the strait usually involve traveling close to Iran due to coral islands, oil wells, pumping platforms, and other transitory hazards that make traveling through the shallower portion of the Gulf more difficult. While mine laying is noisy, it benefits from being able to utilize a large number of civilian and military naval vessels. It has proven to be easily able to escape detection during the Iran-Iraq War. Furthermore, mine removal is a costly and time-consuming operation, which could slow down the war effort. At the heart of Iran's mine-laying strategy is the ability to raise the cost of the war. The Gulf states are currently unable to adapt to the shutdown of the Gulf. Already, most pipeline infrastructure going east to west in Saudi Arabia is already at full capacity, meaning that Saudi Arabia would be unable to easily transport the oil from its eastern oil fields. With nearly 14 to 18% of the world's oil supply traveling through the Persian Gulf, a shutdown of the strait could easily lead to astronomically high cost. By being able to back up the threat of closing the Gulf, Iran is capable of ensuring that its foreign policy threats and demands are seriously taken. However, it should be noted that Iran is highly unlikely to commit such an action, since it would bring the wrath of the US and several other global powers down upon it and could lead to a war where they would lose. While the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is unlikely to occur as long as the nuclear agreement is upheld, it is imperative that the US Navy learn how to adapt to asymmetric naval warfare. By analyzing the swarm tactics used in Iranian war games and understanding how Iran would use its extensive mine collection, the US could learn how to better counter these threats through creating more asymmetric warfare games themselves. From these lessons, the US can prepare its officers to better deal with an inferior adversary's asymmetric attacks, and to focus on acquiring ships and equipment that could effectively deal with such a foe. While the US Navy justifiably had to focus on developing itself as a strong conventional rival to USSR during the Cold War, it must realize that it will be drawn into more asymmetric conflicts than conventional ones in the upcoming decades. Excluding China's slow rising navy and Russia's declining one, the US has no strong conventional naval rivals. To support US foreign policy in the future, the US must realize its need to refocus its naval capabilities to adapt to asymmetric threats. While the US is likely to prevail in such conflicts, it would do so at a high cost of destroyed equipment and casualties if it does not learn how to properly deal with these foes that desire to raise the cost of conflict above sustainable levels for its enemies. By using Iran as a case study, the US Navy can better prepare itself to deal with an asymmetric threat.